You're listening to Tony Terzi. It's Terzi Talk here on the Talk of Connecticut. AM 1360, 1470, 610, and 1240.
All right, welcome back to Terzi Talk here on the Talk of Connecticut, 8:07. Today mostly cloudy with a chance of snow showers, breezy, chilly, 2 to 4 inches of snow in some locales, dusting to 2 inches in others. High of 35 to 40. Tonight, chance of rain or snow shower early, low 18 to 25. And then Sunday, sunny, chilly, high 45. And then Monday, partly to mostly cloudy with a chance for a passing shower and some government corruption. A high of 50 to 55. We have a guest in studio right now. Very happy to be joined by a gentleman by the name of Kevin Brookman. He, for 20 or 25 years, has had an alarm sort of security business, right, Kev? What's the name of your business?
Brookman Protection Systems.
Brookman Protection Systems.
Yep.
So you're asking, so what is this, a business segment? You allow people to pay for 1-hour commercials about Brookman Protection Services? How do I sign my... No, it's not anything like that. He has a blog called We the People Hartford. How do we find it on the web, Kevin?
WeThePeopleHartford.blogspot.com or just WeThePeopleHartford.com.
Okay.
Way.
WeThePeopleHartford.com. Tell us about your blog. Tell us about your website, what the genesis of it was. Why did you start this?
I'm really not exactly sure how it started.
Excellent. Thanks for coming. Have a great day.
It was, for some reason, during the corruption period of Eddie Perez as mayor of City Hall, I started getting a lot of phone calls and tips from people about different things that were going on, bad things going on in this department and throughout City Hall. And after a while, it started adding up. And I think I was one of the first people in Hartford that actually went to the FBI and told them what I was hearing. Then one day out of the blue, I got a phone call from an inspector from the state's attorney's office that said, I think you and I need to talk. And, during the conversation, he told me why he was calling. And I said, I really don't have anything firsthand. I don't witness anything. I said, I've got other people calling me. He said, well, that's what we want. You point us in the direction, and we'll do what we have to do. So a lot of the people, for some reason, I gained the trust of a lot of people at City Hall and throughout different city agencies. And one of my big concerns is that these people, if I was forced to go before the grand jury and their names were public, they would lose their jobs. They'd be out of work in a heartbeat. At that time, I still am, good friends with Len Bestoff from NBC now. And Len had gone to an investigative reporters conference in Baltimore, and he came back, he said, you need to start a blog. And I'm like, I'm not into all that social media stuff. I really don't. He said, no, you need to start a blog. He said one of the seminars that he took was that the federal courts have determined that bloggers are legitimate journalists. And he says you come under all the SHIELD laws to protect reporters from divulging their sources. So he said you need to start a blog to protect your sources. It's not ultimate, but it'll be a lot safer for you.
So was this when Len was still at Channel 3?
Channel 3, yeah.
Okay. All right.
So I started originally, with the blog, we'd get, 5-10 people a day that would go look at it. Now some days, we get 5,000-6,000. I think during the height of it, when Eddie Perez was about to get indicted, it was like, I think one day we had over 8,000 people that went to the blog to read what was going on, which is substantial.
So you, years ago, didn't have the blog, didn't have a website. You just had people who were connected to City Hall calling you with information about what was going on under or on Eddie Perez's watch.
Yeah, and I've kind of been involved politically in Hartford for years.
How so?
And originally was on the Republican Town Committee. I was an elected constable for a while. Just a lot through neighborhood groups and things like that, where people learned, what I was about and that I liked, confronting issues. And I think that's another part of the issue is a lot of people, if you're going to put your neck on the line to try to expose something, you want to know something's going to be done about it. And that's kind of the reputation I have, that, I go after the information that's given to me. So here's where I am today.
Here's where you are. It all started with Eddie Perez. How long ago was that?
Oh, it seems like it's been dragging on for years, but I would...
Been 10 years?
I would think it's probably close to that.
Yeah.
Because, the investigation dragged on for at least 2 or 3 years before he was finally indicted. And then now we're going through the appeals and everything else to see where it finally ends up. So it's been a while.
All right. Former Mayor Perez aside, what's an issue right now that's really sticking in your craw that you have got your thumb on?
I think, the biggest thing right now confronting Hartford is the total lack of leadership. And I've said this to Pedro Segura directly to him that, so many people were praying for Eddie to be indicted and removed from office. And we had high hopes for Pedro Segura when he came in that things would change. And very little has changed. We see the nepotism. We see the favors being handed out at City Hall.
Explain the nepotism for people who don't know.
Well, one of the big things that came out, we've known it for a while, but that came out this week in the media was his former corporation counsel, CEO. She's had a lot of positions in City Hall. The way her friends and family have gotten jobs, and there's no paper trail. There's no applications.
Sandra Key Borges.
Sandra Key Borges, yeah. And it's just like City Hall has become their friends and family employment center.
Explain, there was one post in your blog, I believe it was, about how, whether it was a daughter-in-law or somebody got a job by not using the name.
Well, about a year ago, probably a little over a year ago, you might recall that Sandra Key Borges' city car was totaled out in an accident at Farmington and Broad by her boyfriend, who at the time was the acting assistant fire chief, Terry Waller. They left a bar on Park Street, apparently to go to bail her son out of jail, who had been arrested on a domestic incident, and I believe they found some marijuana or things like that during the arrest. So they were on the way to bail him out. Her boyfriend, who had no authority to drive her city car, was driving. He was a city employee, but the car wasn't issued to him. He wasn't authorized to be driving it. He had an accident, totaled a brand new SUV. And then come to find out, as we dug into the story, she was on the way to the police department to bail out her son out of jail. Now it turns out that the domestic incident the son was involved with, he's since married the woman that he was fighting with. She applied for a city job, and now her married last name is Key Borges. Instead of using that name because somebody would recognize it and say, oh, that's Sandra Key Borges' daughter-in-law now, she's getting favoritism, she applied for the job under her maiden name. But as it turns out, the person that interviewed her to hire her was Terry Waller, Sandra Key Borges' boyfriend. I believe it was his niece or his daughter or sister or something. She interviewed her, who you think she would have recognized this woman's last name wasn't what she was claiming, and she was now a Key Borges. And they hired her because she applied under her maiden name so nobody would know who she was.
Are there nepotism laws in Hartford? Where the
mayor has now come out and is indignant that this all happened because he said in 2013 he put in an anti-nepotism policy.
Okay.
But there's plenty of other instances of people that, we have a councilman whose girlfriend works in the finance department now. We've got a state rep whose daughter now works in the mayor's office because that state rep also runs a Democratic town committee district, and there's endorsements coming up. So apparently the backdoor deal to make sure that they guaranteed the endorsements from this one district, part of the deal was we've got somebody we want to hire in the mayor's office.
Who's the state rep?
Minnie Gonzalez.
Okay.
Who's got her own issues with elections enforcement in the state's attorney's office that are under investigation now. Yeah, there's a lot of things.
All right, we're going to take some calls. Gentleman from West Hartford, Mark from West Hartford. Morning, Mark.
Tony, you're taking a big risk this morning, don't you?
Oh, no, I'm not.
Yeah, you are, because you know why?
What?
Most listeners, or at least that's what it appears to me, think political corruption in this state and municipalities is petty. there was another editorial today where, people can't believe that they're going after Roland. He's going back to jail. I never understood where, is it just rape and murder that's considered a crime? But anyway, you're probably going to have a whole bunch of people who don't care about this, and that's a shame because I do. Hey, Kevin, let's go back to Borges. My father, when he was alive back in the early 90s and through the mid-90s, he told me that this girl is going to take down the city. When she was a city manager, the first thing that really upset him, and I can't remember how much it was it a surplus of money, a rainy day fund? And it was a lot of, I think it was upwards of $20 million that she took and squandered, promised it would be replenished. Am I wrong in that figure?
I'm not really familiar with what you're talking about, but the money that's squandered at Hartford City Hall, you're probably not far off.
Yeah, it was back when she was city manager, and this is back in the Mike Peters days when, they would do things like pick a red light district in China as the sister city, and then they would fly out there on the city dime. And my father said at that point, things are going to go downhill with her.
Did your father...
I hear is she making $250 an hour after she just resigned her position?
There's a letter of intent where, yes, the city hired her back at $250 an hour, which translates out for a 40-hour week to $10,000 a week. They claim, after I exposed it on my blog, I FOI'd, got the letter of intent and everything else signed by the city and the corporation council. I think I came out with that on a Thursday. The mayor's spokesperson claimed on Friday that was her last day that the deal was done. Now, I don't know how long. There was no ending date. There was no dollar amount in the letter of how long this could go on. And if it wasn't on the blog, I'm sure it would still be going on today. But they were kind of caught, so they had to do something about it. But, yeah, definitely she was being paid $250 an hour. And they claim it was to clean up issues with the baseball stadium and things like that had been left hanging. So apparently she's the only one in the corporation counsel's office who was capable of doing that.
Jeez. Oh, that's unbelievable. And one last thing, because I know your blog started with Eddie Perez. Have you been down Park Street where all this corruption began with Eddie? He had that guy, Carlos Costa, who literally stole money by renovating the entire Park Street area. Awning, streets, sidewalks, trees. The pavers are coming up. The street's falling apart. The trees are dead. The awnings are ripped. This guy, Carlos, went from the poorest street in West Hartford, where I live, on Hillcrest, and he lives on Balfour, one of the richest streets. Now, I noticed his house that he built on Balfour isn't falling apart, but the entire Park Street project is. Have you been down there recently?
Yeah, it's amazing to me in a heavily Hispanic city, the number of vacant storefronts we have on Park Street. I had one customer I spoke to a couple weeks ago that said, he's been there 11 or 12 years, and he saw the street start to come back. He said now it's slid back into crime and poverty, and people are once again afraid to go to Park Street. And that's just sad. With some leadership at City Hall, especially with a Hispanic mayor that, typically the Irish politicians take care of the Irish, the blacks take care of the blacks. You would think that would be one of his key goals is Park Street. And for some reason it's not.
We're talking with Kevin Brookman from the We the People Hartford blog. You can find it wethepeoplehartford.com.
Right.
wethepeoplehartford.com or wethepeoplehartford.blogspot. Right?
Well, Tony, thanks for having me on. And,
okay.
And, the one thing about this whistleblower is, Kevin, you can't get fired. That's the awesome thing. And nobody can accuse you of retaliation because I don't think you're lining your pockets with anything.
No, it's actually cost me money, but...
Yeah, I'm sure it does.
That's another
Tony,
story.
All right.
Good work.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the call. Gene in the capital city of Hartford online. By the way, 888-574-2723, 888-574-2723. Kevin Brookman from We the People Hartford. He is just trying to hold people's feet to the fire when it comes to how the city is operated. wethepeoplehartford.com. You can find his blog there. He blogs quite often. You can call in and talk to Kevin. We've got Gene in Hartford now. Hi, Gene.
Hi, how you doing, Tony? How you doing, Kevin?
Doing
Good,
well,
thank you.
doing well. What do you have for Kevin?
Well, I got to say, there's a lot of waste, fraud, and corruption in this state. I mean, it's obviously been going on for years, but also Denise Merrill, I know you had her on, Tony, to talk about the election fraud that recently happened. But I don't know why she didn't take questions as an answer like Kevin is doing.
Yeah, sometimes, they make stipulations. I mean, I've invited Governor Malloy more than a dozen times in the last 2 years, and I've always gotten, well, not this weekend, maybe the next time. Well, not this, Anyway.
Well, this is the problem in the state. Everything's covered up. There's bribes, there's kickbacks, there's so much fraud in the state. There's so many people that are corrupt. It goes back to, for years and years. But
I understand. Do you have any questions or comments for Kevin?
Well, yeah, Kevin. I know you were talking about Eddie Perez, but what do you think of Governor Rowland? Do you think he should have gotten that much time in prison?
I would say if you're violating the laws like that, yes. Especially when it comes to, most people think politics is so dirty and corrupt now. And you get, a lot of people I talk to that don't even vote say, oh, why bother? Nobody listens to me. The system is so dirty. We need to show that it's being cleaned up and that every vote does count. You can't buy an election no matter how hard you try. And if you do, you're going to prison for it. I think that's
What about Lisa Wilson Foley? She only got 5 months and she was at home arrest.
Yeah, five months in prison and then 5 months house arrest. Yep.
Oh, I see. Well, I guess it's fair. I mean, I hope people learn from this lesson now that, they have to stop this corruption in the state.
Well, Gene, I want to thank you for calling, and we'll continue on with Kevin. That's Gene in Hartford.
I think one of the other things you need to look at in the whole Rowland incident is the attorney who started the ball rolling in the first place, by writing up the phony contracts. I would think there's some liability there.
Yeah, he hasn't been held accountable.
They should be looking at him to say, okay, you got this whole thing going with instead of saying, no, I can't do that.
The
it's illegal.
payments were supposed to run through the attorney for Brian Foley.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of fraud.
And not Brian Foley from Hartford Police Department. Poor Brian Foley. Jeez. Yeah. Deputy Chief Foley.
Who's actually a good guy.
He is a good guy. Yeah. Very good guy.
And he's another one that cares very much about the city.
Yeah, he does. Dan in Wethersfield, you're on the air with Kevin Brookman. Hi, Dan.
Hey, how are you doing today, Tony and Kevin?
Doing well. Thank you.
I think Kevin knows who this is. It's Dan Nolan, and I wanted to get your feelings, Kevin, on the way the Hartford Fire Department is running these days.
Is it running? I think that's a valid question. For those that don't know, Dan is a deputy chief with the Hartford Fire Department. His family has a long tradition with the Hartford Fire Department. And Dan and I grew up together in Windsor, along with Deputy Chief Brooks.
Oh.
Who's, all three of us were with St. Gabriel's and other, Windsor groups. I just, it's not a big secret to anybody because he said it to me. He said it to people in the community. Chief Huertas has since his appointment, has come right out and told people how he sold his soul to get the job. And that's because Sandy Key Borges pressured him to bring her boyfriend, fiance, significant other, Terry Waller, in as the assistant chief of the fire department. Now, I never knew who Terry Waller was until the last couple of years, but it seems like just about every promotion he's received in the Hartford Fire Department wasn't based on testing and merit. It's because of his connections to Sandra Key Borges. There's big questions about his involvement with the firefighter Bell death at that fire. Was he in charge? Did he take command or didn't he? Why didn't he? So there's a lot of issues going on. And I think the one thing the Hartford Fire Department needs right now is some strong leadership. The drugs and alcohol and the things that are going on, drugs being done right in the firehouses, drugs being sold out of the firehouses, firefighters showing up for work intoxicated and the things that have done. Somebody needs to take hold of that department and say this is no longer tolerable. We're setting a tone of accountability. And we don't care how strong your union is. If you're coming to work drunk, you're endangering the residents of the city of Hartford. We're going to, do what we have to do to get rid of you. And I think that tone of accountability needs to come. And if Chief Huertas isn't capable of doing it, Mayor Segura needs to step in and find somebody that is. I know it'd be if I say that I think it's Dan Nolan, that'll be the kiss of death for Dan Nolan. You'll never get it. But
I don't think that makes a difference, Kevin, because I would actually sacrifice leaving the job if they could put someone in charge that is capable. But right now, there's a saying in the military that an army of deer led by a lion is to be more feared and more effective than an army of lions led by a deer. And right now, we have a mentally unstable Bambi running the department. And if that doesn't change, all these good people that we have working in for the fire department are under this terrible leadership. It's only going to get worse. Unfortunately, the Bell death, you would hope would wake up quite a few people. But I have to say, we've been, I would say, accidentally successful over the past 10 years that something worse hasn't happened. And I think if it doesn't change quickly, there are going to be more deaths and more injuries under this ineffective leadership that we have right now.
Well, I have to say, knock on wood here, that your prediction is wrong. But it's inevitable. We went 40 years without a firefighter's death. And in this day and age, with the toxic chemicals and things that are out there at fire scenes, we've got to be careful. But okay, one other thing, I hate to paint the whole Hartford Fire Department with such a broad brush, because there are many good men and women that are firefighters there that do a great job day in and day out for the city of Hartford. And just before we go to a break, Tony, one other thing, I want to just ask your listeners to keep in their thoughts and prayers for the next several days. Boston police officer John Moynihan, who was shot yesterday afternoon. And from what I understand, he's in an induced coma at Boston Medical Center in rough shape. The police take a bashing every day now, but here's an officer that was out there just doing a traffic stop, and I think he's 34 years old. Yeah. So keep him in your thoughts and prayers.
Hey, Dan Nolan, thanks for calling, brother.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you bet. Take care. Dan Nolan, Deputy Chief.
Deputy Chief, yeah.
Wow. It was great to talk to him. We're going to take a break and more of Kevin Brookman, We the People, Hartford, and you.
You're listening to Tony Terzi. It's Terzi Talk here on the Talk of Connecticut, AM 1360, 1470, 610, and 1240. You're listening to Tony Terzi. It's Terzi Talk here on the Talk of Connecticut, AM 1360, 1470, 610,
We the People,
and
Hartford
1240.
segment of the show brought to you by Kevin Brookman. We have Kevin Brookman in studio, and for some of you folks who are not who are not from the Hartford area, still a very good read. This is a guy who got involved in the city of Hartford's business, for lack of a better term, because he is a proud resident of Hartford. He has his business in Hartford, and some years ago, during the scandal that brought down former Mayor Eddie Perez, he started really getting involved. As he told us during the first half hour of the show, the state's attorney's office got in touch with him, wanted to talk to him about who his contacts were. His good friend Len Bestoff, who was at Channel 3 and now is at NBC Connecticut as an investigative reporter, was the impetus for him to start this We the People Hartford blog, because he said, you will not have to reveal your sources. You'll be protected by laws that protect journalists if you have a blog. Otherwise, you're exposed. And so he has started this blog. How long have you had the blog, Kevin?
I don't know, probably 5-6 years now.
Okay. It's wethepeoplehartford.com or wethepeoplehartford.blogspot. And one of the entries you had yesterday, Kevin, can we get a package deal? Explain what that post was about.
That was kind of also an indirect jab at the mayor, because when we were looking for a police chief, we hired an outside consulting firm, $75,000 for these outside consultants to come in and find a police chief for us. and they brought back 3 candidates. We already had the perfect candidate in Chief Ravella. Chief Ravella came in basically through the governor's office. When the governor told State's Attorney Kevin Kane the violence was out of control, shootings were out of control. My understanding is the two of them had a meeting in the governor's office, and the governor told Kevin Kane, do something about this. And that's where Kevin Kane took Chief Ravella, who at the time was the chief inspector for the state's attorney's office, and assigned him to put a task force together of state and municipal police officers. Some towns around Hartford bought into it. The state police, corrections, probation, parole. They all started this shooting task force, which was very successful and continues to be very successful in Hartford for reducing gun violence. We spent $75,000 for a search firm. One of the people they brought to us was a chief from, I don't know if it was from Indianapolis or the Indianapolis area, who had just been arrested on a DUI.
Excellent.
And this is a guy, he wants to come in to Hartford to be chief. And there were other issues with the other candidates they brought forward. Eventually, they went ahead and promoted Chief Ravella to the permanent chief anyways. So that was $75,000 we threw out the window. Now we're going outside to find an assistant chief for the fire department. There's plenty of capable people within the department. And I think that's a failure of Chief Huertas. If you're not mentoring your people to come up through the ranks and take over leadership roles, something's wrong. You know, anybody we bring in from the outside is going to have a learning curve of probably at least a year or more of who the players are in the department, how it operates, learning the city, learning the people. It just seems like a waste of money when we have people that are capable. Dan Nolan being one of them. Yeah, he's a friend of mine, and I speak out for him. When he was wrongfully fired, that was a big issue on the blog, and I think that was one of the things that brought about its notoriety was the constant updates on Dan Nolan's case.
Explain that for people who don't know about his case.
Oh, geez, you're pushing my mind here to think back to what it actually was. But Dan Nolan has always been involved, and I don't want to sound like his propaganda manager here, but Dan Nolan has always been involved in charitable organization, whether it's Leah's Foundation, different things for leukemia, things like that, as well as mentoring a lot of young disabled people. That's probably the wrong term, but he's a very charitable person. When the city didn't like some of the things he was doing, because as you can hear when he called in, he's very outspoken. He says what's on his mind, and you know where he stands. There's no wishy-washy.
What is not to like about doing charitable work? I'm not sure. That was the impetus that they used to get rid of him, is that he was putting pressure on academy recruits to get involved in charity organizations, and he would give them extra points at the academy if they were doing things for charity. Makes you a well-rounded person.
You would think.
Are you kidding me?
That was the reason they used to terminate him, is that he was putting undue pressure on recruits in the academy and using his position for, I guess, personal gain because...
because the charities don't get the money. He gets it.
It also made him look better that he was a leader and getting people to be involved. So
God forbid you should try to create a total human being.
But the city terminated him under Eddie Perez once again. The main reason was that Dan Nolan. See, the Hartford Fire Department is also a spot where you can push people through that are politically connected through the academy. You can't do that in the police department because there's too many state laws that require the background checks, polygraphs, all the training, all the things that have to be done before you can be hired as a police officer. None of that exists for the fire department. If you pass the academy and you get certified, you're in. In the police department, if you've got any arrests, any drug issues, things like that show up in a polygraph, you're washed out. So anyways, Dan had people that were politically connected that were being shoved through the fire academy. One of them was her first day of training. She showed up, and they were told they have to do PT. Now,
What's PT?
Physical training.
Yeah.
Jogging, running, things like that. Again, God forbid we make sure that our firefighters are in shape.
Right.
But anyways, I believe she was connected to a union, a high-ranking union member.
Okay.
And the first day of training, Dan told her she had to do this, this, and this, and she says, no, I don't. And he said, what? And she says, I've already been told I don't have to. And then she came up and said she was like 5 or 6 months pregnant. Now, how are you going to send a pregnant person into the fire tower where they burn things to teach you how to go into smoky buildings?
Right.
That's just putting somebody in danger. It's reckless.
Right.
So he apparently, I think he failed her out of the academy because she couldn't do everything. And then there was a huge issue that, he can't do that. And that's when the whole mess started, that he was removing people from the fire academy that weren't qualified to be there in the first place. And it's like, God forbid, we can't allow this in Hartford. We need to get rid of him. So they fired him because he was the roadblock in the way of these politically connected hires. It eventually went through the labor board, through the courts, and the city was ordered to give him his job back.
How long did it take?
Oh, it was a while. He was out of work well over a year, I believe.
Did he get back pay?
Well, the other thing about Dan is he's a military veteran for the United States, and I believe during some of this time he was on deployment in either Iraq or Afghanistan. And I think he may still be battling for some of that back pay that the city never came forward that he was supposed to get. But it's just, it's indicative of the way the city of Hartford works. You would think you would be, praising employees like that are making the city look in a positive light to people. Okay, here's a guy who volunteers for the military. He's putting his life in danger in Iraq, and he comes back here and we mess with him. What does that say about, the way and they're still doing it. There's a firefighter now that was in the Air Guard and should have been considered for a promotion, I believe, to an engine driver, and I know I'm getting the terms wrong, but they passed him over because he was in the military, didn't allow him to take a test, which they're required to under federal law. You can't hold somebody back because they're on deployment. You have to give them the same opportunities, and the city of Hartford doesn't do that.
When did that happen? When did they pass over him? Was this a year ago?
No, this is within the last couple months. He contacted me, so it's still ongoing.
Did you write about it?
I haven't as of yet because I'm still trying to gather documents and things like that. That's the other part. Is the city of Hartford, and I don't want to focus on the fire department here.
No.
But I got a call a few weeks ago that.
Hold on just one sec. By the way, we are speaking, for those of you just tuning in, Kevin Brookman, who's got his finger on the pulse of Hartford. He writes a blog called We the People Hartford. So you can find it either wethepeoplehartford.com or wethepeoplehartford.blogspot. Continue.
So anyways, last year, or about a year ago, we bought a brand new piece of fire apparatus in Hartford. $750,000 for it. Ladder 6, which is based on Main Street in downtown Hartford. Now, you would think your ladder truck for downtown is a crucial piece of equipment. Apparently, anytime the back bucket on the ladder is worked on, there's a vendor that has to come in and x-ray it because you're putting firefighters a couple 100 feet up in the air and you want to make sure everything is put back together right. So this vendor has to come in and x-ray it. There was some damage to it several months ago. It was up at what they call City Yard, the repair garage up on Jennings Road. It was up at City Yard being fixed, and then it came time to have it x-rayed, and the vendor wouldn't come out to x-ray it because the city hadn't paid his bills. So it sat up there for probably at least 3 or 4 months not being used. A brand new $750,000 piece of equipment sat up at City Yard because the vendor wouldn't come x-ray it. Somebody called me about it. I FOI'd all the repair documents, the bills to the vendor, which the city still hasn't given to me, which is a violation. But miraculously, last weekend, Ladder 6 comes back on the line. The bill has been paid, and the ladder truck is back out there. Now, how does a city that just agrees to spend millions of dollars on a baseball stadium and can't find, what could it be, a couple thousand for the vendor to come out and x-ray this ladder truck? It's just reckless.
That's a good segue that we're going to hold for just a second. We're going to take a time out with Kevin Brookman. We the People Hartford blog. We are going to talk about that baseball stadium, his thoughts about it, what it will or won't do for the city of Hartford. If you have any thoughts, if you have read Kevin's blog and you either agree or disagree We want to hear from you. 888-574-2723, 888-574-2723. This is Terzi Talk.
You're listening to Tony Terzi. It's Terzi Talk here on the Talk of Connecticut. AM 1360, 1470, 610, and 1240.
We are back here on Terzi Talk at 8:48. 12 minutes left in this hour. Love to hear from you. Love to have you speak with Kevin Brookman, We the People Hartford blog. He started several years ago on the advice of his good friend, Len Bestoff, formerly of Channel 3, now with NBC Connecticut, of course, heading up their troubleshooters unit over there. Now, the stadium in Hartford, what sort of issues do you have with that? And I know we have less time than you probably need.
Can we get another hour?
Yeah.
I love baseball. I love the Rockettes. I've gone out there with my nephews. We've tailgated in the parking lot before games. I really want to see it succeed in Hartford. I think it'll be good for the city. But I just don't see it happening. We've got the $4.5 million that we're going to have to pay every year is money we don't have. I got a call the other day that we balanced the city's budget last year by selling a parking garage to the state. And apparently the state, they were supposed to close on it the other day. The state pulled out of the closing because of discrepancies they found somewhere in the deal. So now that is probably another $50 million hole in the city's budget unless the state comes back to the table and eventually does close. We've got so much going on in this city that, we really should be using the money responsibly instead of going out and stealing a baseball stadium from another city that really needs it as much as we do. And it was all just shoved through so quick. Nobody can still give you solid numbers of where we stand, what's going to happen, what the costs are. It's just been like rush. Apparently last month at the meeting of the Capital Region Development Authority, the developer said that the company that was in negotiations for the supermarket has pulled out. So apparently there's not a supermarket on the planning stages of it now either, which for that project to work, it's all got to come together. Just a baseball stadium by itself isn't going to do it. It needs the housing. It needs the retail. It needs the market, which Hartford sorely needs. We need the whole project to come together. But it's got to be responsibly done so it benefits both the city and its residents, not just the political legacy of a mayor that's running for re-election and needs to say, I did something.
Yeah. We've got Yukon coming downtown. We've got Front Street coming to life. Some of the vacant buildings being turned into many apartments, talk of whether or not there should be I still call it the Civic Center, brand new XL Center. There are lots of issues on the plate. I said plate. Caviar. Take over from there, my friend.
That was another big deal. I had gotten a phone call from somebody saying, you need to FOI the mayor's credit card receipts for New Year's Eve of, 3 years ago, I think it was. And they didn't say much more than that. They said just push, FOI his credit card receipts and you'll see. And when I got the credit card receipts for him and his chief of staff, there was the charges to Max downtown for rack of lamb, caviar, champagne, all on New Year's Eve.
On taxpayers' dime.
On taxpayers' dime, yeah. And that turned into a big deal. And then eventually after they got caught, this was New Year's Eve, January. In February, the mayor paid back the city. Once he knew that I had the documents and he was nailed, he paid the city back for the dinner.
Which was how much, Kevin?
It was like almost
$800.
$800 something. Yeah, for everything. Which, whether it's $50 or $800, that's money you're taking from the people of Hartford. There's people in Hartford that don't know where their next meal's coming from, but they still have to pay the taxes on their car at 70-some-odd mills. They still have to pay, their electric, their heating bills, and they're struggling to get by. And here we are, the mayor of the capital city and his chief of staff and corporation counsel are out eating caviar and drinking champagne on the backs of the taxpayers. That's just immoral. It's immoral and unconscionable that they would even consider doing that. And then, as it turns out, Sandra Key Borges had done basically something very similar when she was back during Mayor Mike's years, 10, 12 years ago.
She's city manager.
She was city manager at the time. And after a council meeting, they went to Carbone's in the South End, and she was buying, as it turns out, they were shots at the time called buttery nipples or slippery nipples. They were out pounding down these shots and paid for them on a city credit card. So she was nailed once for it, and now a second time she did it under Pedro Segura. It's like the people in the mayor's inner circle, it's almost like they just go out of their way to embarrass him and think of what can we do next to make him look like an idiot in the media. And it happens almost daily.
Pedro wins re-election or not?
Oh, God, if there's a God, not. I just don't think we can survive another 4 years under him.
Former judge running.
He hasn't announced yet.
Okay.
Judge Killian is Hartford's probate judge until, I believe, April 10th.
Okay, yeah, not former.
And then I think you'll see an announcement coming out of him quickly at that point that he's going to run for mayor.
What you wrote about him, you put some of his information on your blog. Tell us a little bit about Judge Killian.
I've just met him recently, so I really don't know him. I've heard him speak a couple times, and very impressive public speaker, very motivational. What Hartford needs right now is a cheerleader. We need a reincarnation of Mayor Mike. Mayor Mike wasn't strong mayor, but he made people feel good about Hartford. If he went to a suburb, people would say, "Oh, the mayor was here last night. We met him. What a nice guy. Whatever." That's what Hartford needs again. We need somebody who can walk into the governor's office, have a decent relationship, not adversarial, but that can actually treat each other with respect, get things done. We need a mayor that can work with the legislature and get things done. We need a mayor that can relate to the people in the city of Hartford. The Valentine's Day weekend, so probably would have been the 15th of Sunday. Mm-hmm. We had that real bad windstorm and blizzard type storm.
Yes.
I'm right on Sigourney Street, so I was in my kitchen cooking breakfast, and I look out, and here's a woman that I would say elderly. I don't know how old she was. She was walking south on Sigourney Street, headed toward Farmington, wrapped in like a comforter just to keep her warm. And I don't know where she was headed. I don't know whether she was headed to the bus stop, the grocery store, whatever. Mm-hmm. But that's the reality of a lot of residents in Hartford. They have to survive. They do whatever they have to do to survive. They don't have the luxury of, the big homes on Terry Road or Scarborough Street, whatever. They're out there struggling to get by, and they need a mayor that understands the struggles. And, I talked to a business owner the other day. I said, has anybody from the city ever come in and said, what can we do to help you grow your business, to help your business thrive? He said, I've never seen anybody from the city come in my front door. And that's sad.
And he's probably been in business a long time.
It's a well-known downtown business. It's been around for years. If I told you the name, you'd realize it. But it's just we have to get a clue of what people are going through day in and day out there and try to make their lives easier.
Take a call before we go to the top of the hour news. Now, what are your plans for the rest of the day? Are you fairly open? Yeah. Okay. You want to stay after the top of the hour news?
If you want me,
that'd be all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Tom from Meriden on line 2 this morning. Tom, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, what's cooking?
Hey, this is Tom from Meriden. How are you?
Good.
I just enjoy your show, enjoying your guest, and I just wanted to say that none of this stuff is surprising. It's common. Glad this guy is out there finding things out. And, yeah, they're completely honest, and suddenly their integrity returns when they've been caught.
Yeah, right.
And, this woman, Borges, I don't know who she is because I'm from Meriden, but Meriden has its own problems, as you know, with the police and all that stuff,
Sure.
and cover up with that.
Sure.
We can go on and on about the corruption there, but this woman, how she's still in state government is beyond me, or town government is beyond me.
Yeah.
She should have been pushed out. She's a crook.
Well, and that's part of it. After they get caught, like she recently, this week after the whole nepotism issue came up, that she's hired her son, all these people that are related to her. She goes to the ethics commission and asks for an opinion on whether it's proper. Now, as the city's attorney, shouldn't you have a pretty good conscience? You can sit back and say, maybe I should look. This doesn't pass the smell test. Let me look back and, tell my relatives, geez, as much as I'd like to help you, it's not going to look good. Go out to the mall and find a job, or go to a construction company, find a job. But I can't bring you into City Hall. Do you really need to ask the Ethics Commission if that's proper?
Well, no, she knows that it's not. And here's the entire issue. The issue with that is, and the reason she's doing it is because she's always done what she's wanted to do when she's wanting to do it and gotten away with it. She knows damn well that it's completely unethical.
Yeah, exactly.
But as you said, she's just doing it. She's making appearances, and she's making a fool out of herself in the process, by the way.
You're listening to Tony Terzi. It's Terzi Talk here on the Talk of Connecticut, AM 1360, 1470, 610, and 1240. You're listening to Tony Terzi. It's Terzi Talk here on the Talk of Connecticut, AM 1360, 1470, 610, and 1240.
We are on the air this morning, this hour, with the gentleman who is the curator of the art that is the We the People Hartford blog. It's wethepeoplehartford.com or wethepeoplehartford.blogspot.com. It's Kevin Brookman. Tom, thanks for the call.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, you bet. Tom from Meriden. Certainly, you can call in if you're from the city of Hartford, if you've worked in the city of Hartford. We would welcome the mayor. We would welcome Sandra Key Borges. We would welcome some of the key players from Hartford who have had some things uncovered about them, not only by mainstream media, but also by a gentleman by the name of Kevin Brookman. He'll be continuing to stay on board. 888-574-2723. 888-574-2723. This.
You're listening to Tony Terzi. It's Terzi Talk here on the Talk of Connecticut, AM 1360, 1470, 610, and 1240.
All righty, welcome back to Terzi Talk 9:07. We are in the stretch run, and we, by popular demand, are keeping over for part of a second hour. Kevin Brookman from the We the People Hartford blog, wethepeoplehartford.com. You can read all about what he writes about. He writes about everything Hartford. And he just wants to make sure that folks who are running the city, who've got the keys to the car, are minding their P's and Q's. And many times he finds out through his sources that, he's not a journalist. You don't have to be a journalist to know how to find sources. Through his sources, he finds out that many times those folks who are running the city of Hartford are not minding their P's and Q's. He's good friends with Len Bestoff from NBC Connecticut, a long time, used to work with my dad at Channel 3. And so we've got lots of callers who are waiting to talk to Kevin Brookman. By the way, coming up bottom of the hour, Mike McLaughlin, state senator from the Danbury area, talking about campaign finance reform. So if you have questions or comments about that, certainly after the bottom of the hour news. But first, line 3. Line 3 is Bob in Enfield. Yes, Bob.
How you doing? I know it's budget time for many towns, and there's a lot of negativity going around.
Yes, indeed, for sure.
Well, especially up in Enfield, we have a town that the population is declining. The enrollment has declined probably 1,000 students since '98.
Going to one high school, right?
Or going to one high school. Well, partly by necessity, because both of them needed major renovation.
Right.
But, the school board is suffering from severe withdrawal symptoms because at one time the school population was 30% of the total population, and
right.
And the parents, they had 80% of control of the schools, and now they're, running 30 to 40% of the say in the town. Other issues are more important at this point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what else is on your mind this morning, Bob?
Well, I was just reading in the Hartford Current this morning. Looks like the state wants control of the property tax on the cars and take it away from the towns. And it looks like Hartford's going to be a big loser. And, of course, people from Greenwich could complain because their property tax is going to go up on the cars.
Mm. Yeah, and you hear people feeling sorry from those from Greenwich. What do you know, Kev, about what's happening with the car taxes in Hartford?
Well, it's a big problem, especially in the large cities like Hartford. I don't know what we would do if the motor vehicle tax goes away. It's a huge part of our budget. But in Hartford, we pay, just rounding it up, I think it's 78 mils on our cars. And we wonder why so many Hartford people try to register at relatives' homes or in other towns. And that was one of the first big stories out on the blog was about a couple politicos in Hartford. They're registered down somewhere in Fairfield County because I think it was 17 or 18 mils.
Wow.
So they were paying far less in another town. And we see it a lot now, and this is a story Len did recently, about the people that are going to Maine to register their cars in Maine to avoid property taxes. Maine is a state where I guess as long as you pay them, they'll give you a registration. Doesn't matter where you live, and it dodges the local property taxes. But it's an issue. Yesterday somebody had sent me an email about how a candidate for mayor has strong ties with the governor, and it'd be great if he gets elected because then we can go to the legislature for more money. Well, whether people realize it or not, the legislature no longer has money to give out to cities. And when I first started the blog, I did a story. We had gone to the legislature, the superintendent of schools and the Board of Education did, because they needed $3 million to balance their budget. And they claimed it was for transportation. So the legislature scraped and found the money and gave Hartford $3 million for transportation. The following week, the superintendent of schools, Adamowski, gave out $2.8 million in bonuses to Hartford school employees. And the legislature was furious over that. We gave you $3 million for transportation, and then you sent $2.8 million out the back door in bonuses. Where's the sense in this? And that's the stuff that goes on. We can no longer count on the state to balance our budget. We've got to start doing it our own. The mayor needs to look at his scheduler, his communication staff, and start saying, we need to cut. We have, it's not so much we have a revenue problem with taxes. We have a spending problem that we're wasting too much money.
Line 2, a good friend of the show, John in Hartford. John, what's your question or comment for Kevin Brookman, the curator, the chief bottle washer?
That I have a lot of comments more than just questions, but I'll try.
Good morning, Jonathan.
Just a question. I think, Kevin, you focus a lot on the emphasis of city government and where city government needs to be corrected, and it contributes to a lot of problems and issues in the city. But I think even beyond city government issues, you have to look at the whole history and the reality of the, urban city like Hartford comparable to many other urban cities. I don't think personally Hartford got destroyed when the Eddie Perez administration started it in the 2000s. I think he definitely contributed in a lot of areas of making things worse. But I think I talked to people who tell me the city of Hartford was really going completely in the wrong direction as far back as the 60s when you had the riots, you had businesses leaving. Then you had the George Addison administration. People felt like he was ignoring other parts of the city. I mean, if you trace the whole history of the city of Hartford, we went from the richest per capita city of the 19th century to one of the poorest cities in the country. So it's a deep combination problem, Kevin, I think the city of Hartford is dealing with, unlike, many other urban cities. But even if I'm willing to bet on a new mayor coming into the city, let's say Luke Bronin, able to address city government and make city government more efficient, you still got major problems with your educational structure. You got major problems with your job training, job hiring practices. You have a combination, Kevin, of other problems in your city that I don't know if city government or city hall can be part of the solution. And I just kind of feel like, when you have a city and the residents and city government is not on the same page, you don't have the city residents.
That's a major part of the problem, though, Jonathan, is until we start engaging our electorate and being part of the solution, nothing's going to change. Do you think the nonsense that goes on in Hartford day in and day out, do you think that would be tolerated in West Hartford or Farmington or Avon? No, they'd be storming City Hall or Town Hall saying, we're not going to accept this. We're not going to accept you hiring back the city attorney at $250 an hour or $10,000 a week. That's just not responsible and fiscally prudent. And they would be upset. They'd be up in arms about this. At Hartford, you barely get a handful of people that attend city council meetings unless there's a real hot button issue. These are the type of things we need to get our electorate involved and let our politicians know, okay, you may get elected this year, but don't count on our vote in 4 years if you're not running this city right. We're going to rebel, we're going to make change, and we're going to do things differently. That's what we need to start doing, is engaging our electorate.
That was John in Hartford. Thank you, brother, for calling in. And Irma in East Hartford. How are you, Irma?
Good morning. I have a question. Can I get back to the Roland issue for a minute?
Sure, yes. If it's related to our guest, Kevin Brookman, I would be happy to take your question.
Oh, yes, I have a question for him.
Okay.
Now, what will 3-year incarceration cost taxpayers?
I have no idea.
No.
I know sometimes.
I'm just wondering, wouldn't it be more logical to have him do community service and pay a fine than incarcerate him?
I think the idea there is that then that's not a deterrent to him personally.
Or to others that don't want to go to prison for doing the same type of thing.
Right.
As much as prison is supposed to reform people, it's also a deterrent against others committing the same type of crimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, hardened criminals were released to save the state some money. That's the logic I'm using.
But you would think after the first time somebody would learn their lesson and not want to go back to prison. Right. So I think in this case it's a necessary deterrent. You can't just let them walk away and say, okay, you can still go home and watch TV every night, have your home cooking, and do answer the phone, do what you want to do. You're not going to be able to do that from a federal prison.
Yeah, but a stiff penalty, would hurt him. But no, that's all I was thinking about.
Well, I appreciate your call, Irma. That was nice of you to listen and nice of you to hang on the line and give us a call. That was Irma in East Hartford, 917 here on the Talk of Connecticut. We've extended our visit with Kevin Brookman, who is the person responsible for the We the People Hartford blog. You can find it. You can read about it. Yes, it is focused on Hartford, but perhaps in your city. Perhaps it'll give you an idea of something to do in your city to hold the city leaders to their feet to the fire. You can find what Kevin writes about on a daily basis, and he will link you to other stories many times from other sources at wethepeoplehartford.com. That's wethepeoplehartford.com or wethepeoplehartford.blogspot.com. blogspot.com. Now, for those who joined us late, Kevin, what do you do in your quote-unquote real life?
I own an alarm company. We do security systems, fire alarms, cameras, things like that. So that's what hopefully pays the bills.
And what's the name of your business?
Brookman Protection Systems.
Do you have a website? Brookman Protection Systems.
BrookmanProtectionSystems.com.
Okay. And you, commercial and residential?
Yeah.
Okay. How did you get into that business? Is it a family thing, or?
No, I've always pretty much been in the security business. And then about 25 years ago, I was working for another company. Mm-hmm. Got fed up working for someone else, and I was actually in sales. So I went out and started my own business and eventually got my state license and went through the whole process and have been doing it on my own ever since.
That's interesting. Interesting that a guy who is in the the alarm, the security business seems like a natural transition that you're looking to sound the bells and whistles and alarms in the city, which you love so much. That's kind of an interesting and a fitting transition.
I think that's appropriate is the love for the city, because I remember, my grandmother used to live up in Windsor, and Saturday morning she worked at the Travelers in the cafeteria, and Saturday morning it would take the city bus into Hartford. Downtown would be thriving. She had a few friends down there that ran businesses downtown.
Going to G. Fox was a big thing for people from the burbs.
Yeah, G. Fox, the Connecticut Room, over to Sage Allen to the bakery, and then all the stores. And she had one that was like a 5 and dime on Church Street. And I remember it was an Asian woman, and we would go there, go in the back room, sit down, have tea, things like that. Wow. And she always had Mexican jumping beans. Which were just always amazed me, watching the jar just moving in there. But that's back when Hartford was in its heyday. You'd come down at Christmas, and all the storefronts would have the animated characters. You'd go up to Constitution Plaza. You'd go up to the 11th floor, I think, at G. Fox, to Santa Claus in the Winter Village and everything.
Seeing Santa Claus come down the day after Thanksgiving on Constitution Plaza, I mean, that was a family thing we did.
Yeah. And the last time I remember seeing that was taking my nephews in there during Mayor Mike's era. And I think it was his last year in office. But that's, when you think about the movie theaters we used to have downtown, there's no reason we can't get back to that. People say, the malls have ruined that. People don't go into downtown anymore. Well, they would if you gave them something to come downtown for.
Right.
And I think that's what we need, is the vision and the leadership to make those things happen.
Ultimately, the baseball stadium, is that ultimately going to be a good thing or not?
I'm hoping. I think history is the only thing that's going to prove to us whether it is or not.
Yeah.
I don't see it being the jobs mechanism that everybody talks about. It's seasonal. It's, I don't know, what was it, 70 games a year? So I don't see it as, there may be jobs, but there's not going to be careers. There's not going to be careers that people can raise their families on, send children to college. Those are the jobs we need in Hartford. And those are the jobs, unfortunately, that are moving to the suburbs. We just saw UTC take, a few hundred jobs from Hartford to Farmington.
The Gold Building?
Yeah, and those are the things we need to be, making sure that happens. Luckily, the governor had the vision to make sure they're still going to be in Hartford. So at least we're not seeing jobs go to South Carolina or something. But I would much rather see those jobs still in Hartford, because, there's the whole fallout effect. Those are jobs of people that are using the dry cleaners downtown, going to lunch downtown, hopefully using insurance agencies and things like that they can run out to at lunch. Those are also jobs that we lose when we start losing these jobs to the suburbs. So we need another cheerleader. We need somebody that knows how to work with the business community and grow these jobs and bring people back here.
I want to take another call. We're on line 3 this morning from the lovely town of Goshen near Torrington. Joanne. Good morning, Joanne.
Hi there. Oh, my, this man, back in the 80s, I was in a tax group. I got on the Fair Rent Commission. I was the one with children in my schools. And for 6 years, I spoke before meetings, and did I lambaste those people what this man is doing? I mean, I just in the Fair Rent, I'll give you an example. When I was in the Fair Rent, they were spending maybe $2,500 for the year. And when budget came around, they wanted $18,000 more.
Mm.
And remember I called you about zero-based taxing, base budgets?
Yes.
And that's when I started to see how they were wasting money. They weren't figuring what they spent. They were tacking on just more money. That's what the school, when I was in the tax booth, and I used to speak before the educational school system, and what they were doing, they were tacking on at budget time, asking for $6 million. And through the 6 years that I was in the tax group, they wound up with $3 million more. They always put it higher because they knew they wanted to at least get half as that much. The system is broken. And what is wrong, I feel, as a female, and I was this person that had 3 children with a husband that left me because I didn't want a man that scared the hell out of me in my life and my children. And he quit his job so I could get nothing. So I didn't have much support at this time, and I got in the tax group. And you know what? One of the final things after 6 years, I kept 15 years of records of the school system. And what I found in my records, now this was not my records, this is what I got off the budgets and everything. And also, luckily, I got the blueprints of every school in Danbury, Connecticut. That's where I was at that time. So I knew how many students we could hold in the school system. In 15 years, they went from 11,000 population down to 8,000. When I started keeping the salaries, because we know it is the salaries that cost the most, well, I found out that they had not less teachers, they had 30 more teachers in the school system with 3,000 less students. And you know where it was?
Where?
Remedial. They stuck those 30 teachers that they kept building up with the union. They didn't want to give up these teaching positions with 3,000 less students.
Joanne from Goshen. She's one of the folks from outside of Hartford who's doing, it appears, some of the work that Kevin Brookman has in the big city here in Hartford. We're going to take one more call for our guest, the curator of the We the People Hartford blog, Elizabeth in Windsor. You're on. Good morning.
Good morning. This is Elizabeth from Windsor. One comment.
Yes.
The Hartford Courant doesn't act as though there was a town of Windsor. In the past, and my late husband, we were very, very active in Windsor. I'm still a little active. I get the Hartford Courant Thursday through Sunday, and then I get the Journal Inquirer every day.
Okay.
If you want the Windsor News, take the Journal Inquirer. If you want the obituary, take the Hartford Courant.
Okay.
There is very, very little news gets in the Hartford Courant about Windsor.
That's Elizabeth from Windsor with circulation advice this morning. Thank you, dear, for calling in. I appreciate that. 9:27 here on a Saturday morning. Coming up after the bottom of the hour, Mike McLaughlin, state senator, Republican from the Danbury area. He's going to be talking about something to do with the state election reforms that took effect back in 2005 after the Rowland scandal, after former Governor John Rowland went to prison the first time. Next time he goes to prison will be, I want to say it's June 16th, and he's scheduled to head over to New York, near Middletown, New York, a prison there. Kevin Brookman, before you go, any final thoughts?
I just want to, we are a great city. We've got great employees working day in and day out for the people of Hartford. Just with some proper leadership, we can start moving back more. It's not as bad as it seems. There is corruption. There are problems. But if we keep an eye on it, we can change that.
And you are a man who's keeping his eye on it. And I'm sure all of the citizens of Hartford very much appreciate that. Now, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, do you have a spot on your blog where people can email you?
They can, on the blog, you can make comments. Okay. A lot of times I'll get people make comments, say, please do not publish this, and then give me details about something. My phone number and my email are all on the blog, so if somebody wants to call me, everything is confidential. Okay. You're not named on there or whatever. So if you want to get in touch with me or you have something to talk about, feel free to give me a call. Yeah.
And do you thank Len Bestoff to this day for making the suggestion to you to start this blog? Not only to protect yourself, but...
I know he's listening now, so I don't want to be too mean. But some days I wonder, did he do me a favor or not? But yes, it's definitely made a change. I know there's positive things happening in Hartford because of the blog that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So, Len is somebody that taught me how to do it right, and I really appreciate that. Nice. Verifying sources, making sure you get your objective to people and what you do. and give them the benefit of the doubt. And, I owe that to Len. So
before we go, do you have conversations with Pedro Segarra? Do you have conversations with Sandra Key Borges?
I haven't talked to Pedro in years.
Okay. Can you give your phone number? Would you mind giving it on the air?
My cell phone is 860-883-2297. That's 860-883-2297. I have it with me almost all the time. So if anybody wants to give me a call, it's there.
Kevin Brookman, We the People Hartford. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You bet.
You're listening to Tony Terzi. It's Terzi Talk here on the Talk of Connecticut. AM 1360, 1470, 610, and 1240.